I would like to start off my presentation more from the point of view of challenges that companies are facing today in kind of getting some of these concepts implemented, because that's where exactly SAP is trying to study, learn, and help companies by. But before that, I would like to start off with a Dilbert snippet. I'm kind of a Dilbert fan, and if you look at this particular snippet, you can get, kind of, you can relate to it in terms of sometimes what we do. Okay, when we are asked to present certain facts, to our consumers, which could be senior management or our peers. And if you try to understand what exactly is the reason why such things happen, it's all purely because of complexity. Okay, complexity that's seeped into business models for the simple reason, for the simple reason that this has been the way we have been practicing business models all this while. And if each one of us would introspect, are there complexities in the enterprises that we are working for or we have worked for? I'm sure each of us will be able to come up with at least 3 or 4 areas of improvement, okay, even today as we speak. So what SAP has done, since I'm working for SAP, what SAP has done over time is to try and study the typical challenges which prove to be constraints to implement such concepts around total cost management if required. And if you try to break this up, it's largely because of one single reason, which is data accuracy and data availability. Over time, if you try and study a company which is required to kind of implement a concept around total cost management, the very fact of sourcing data, studying the data, ensuring that the data is accurate, reliable, trustworthy, to help simulate models if need be, and take and present those facts to the senior management to take those corrective decisions, itself is a challenge. And that, in essence, makes it historical. And today, in today's times, as was correctly kind of said by the earlier panelists in terms of digital, real-time, etc., anything historical will lose its value. It's like a report. Okay? It's like a health report. If I'm told that you had so much of blood pressure and sugar about a month ago, it is not relevant to me. Okay? I need to know what is it today at this moment. So and what we see, with our customers, even in India, is when we go and try and see if some of these aspects can be supported with adequate automation, we hit bottlenecks, okay, in terms of advising our customers. We say that, look, you have an issue of multiple siloed repositories of information, and what is it that you're trying to do to get that addressed? What is it that you're trying to do to, if need be, have a governance on data that you're kind of relying on, that you're trusting? Business processes are complex. Today, people are talking about GST. I'm sure a lot of advisors are using this opportunity and walking their way to the bank, but today it could be GST, tomorrow it could be something else. But having said that, is there a sustainable way in which one could devise models and mechanisms to simulate what is the impact of, if need be, regulations on core processes, so that the dependency on experts in terms of advising us what needs to be done can be self-sustained? And technology can broadly simulate and tell us what is the most optimal way of getting that change implemented. And that is possible today, okay, if you have the right kind of an approach. And of course, technology. Because today we are talking not about structured data, but we are also talking about unstructured data in a big way, which can influence your cost structures. Because if you typically kind of study the perceptions about our companies or the companies that we work for, from, like, say, social media platforms, you could actually gain a lot of cues, basis feedback from customers or impacted parties, which can give you ideas to optimize your processes. Today we are starting at digital. So digital has to be essentially your surname, without which you are kind of branded irrelevant. But yes, it's going to hit you at some time. It's a hype. We need to understand this hype and see how is it typically impacting us. Take a simple example. I mean, forget about driverless cars. Today, if you're driving from point A to point B, the way the car has actually become more intelligent in terms of highlighting probably areas of failure, which is going to hit you a kilometer down the line. Okay? Or as you reach the destination, the way your smartphone is able to guide you in terms of where you want to go, what you want to do. Okay? And if you typically try and analyze the impact of digital on every individual, it's actually much more outside of the organization than within. And that's the kind of expectation people have within the organization when they are kind of put questions saying, how do we typically help optimize cost? And that's exactly where there's an expectancy around how can technology help us. Okay, in terms of kind of getting all these simulations done, getting all these kinds of models kind of, from a forward-looking standpoint worked out. Now, so what SAP did is when we studied our customers, and this is a global study, so when we studied our customers, when we spoke with a lot of customers, we have our customer advisory. We also have an Indus group, which is typically a platform to take feedback from our customers. And when we try to understand what exactly are the kind of challenges that they're trying to solve, of course, cost management being one of them, because that's one reason that we always get to hear for not wanting to invest in SAP. We feel, look, there are a couple of key things, that is kind of impacting practically every organization. And depending upon the sector, the kind of initiatives that the companies have taken is to safeguard and protect areas which will hurt the most. So as was rightly said by the delegate from JSW, logistics is one of the key areas for a steel manufacturing kind of a company. Likewise, in retail, it's supply chain and customer experience. So obviously, you need to innovate, okay, and optimize on cost models, whereby you can actually get the most effective, I would say, service or product out to your customer. Now, typically, when it comes to technologies, now look at the perspective of a cost accountant, okay, a conventional cost accountant who is trying to solve this puzzle, okay, in terms of getting the right cost recommendation, okay, or in terms of a dialogue with his peers. A, as we said, the challenge about data. B, the time, which typically it takes to work on this particular data and then present the facts to the peers and have that effective dialogue. Okay, all these are constraints which have to be addressed, without which much of this would typically remain theory. It was tried about a decade ago. Leading companies have implemented it. More and more companies would implement it because of mandates, because of compulsion, and for obvious reasons that there are areas of improvement. But having said that, if it has to be sustained as a part of the DNA within every organization, certain fundamental bottlenecks have to be eased. Certain fundamental bottlenecks will have to be addressed. It has to be, any technique that you typically use will have to be easy from a user experience standpoint. So it's like, how much time does it take for an individual to get used to a new smartphone? Or for that matter, the revolution that Apple brought onto us. It should be predictive, it should be forward-looking and not historical, because historical data, while it's important, is a learning for us, but basis that particular learning and the internal and external kind of variables, it should be intelligent enough to apply statistical methods to help you take those forward-looking kind of calls. Scalability is important, because as organizations grow beyond boundaries, it has to be scalable. So whatever techniques that typically one would use has to be scalable and has to be as close to real time as possible. So some of these other points is what typically SAP has used in terms of getting these points of improvement delivered as a part of offerings, or in other words, technology. Now, this is something which is a typical, I would say, slide that explains what exactly are the key initiatives that one would do for sustaining revenue growth, to optimize on cost, and if required, optimally utilize your resources. But this is not new. But I would like to share my next slide with respect to what has been the journey, okay, and how is it that technology has kind of enabled the leading companies to use and then kind of get all these concepts and philosophies implemented. When initially technology came in, it was all primarily focused on reporting, static reporting. Okay, so it was purely to ensure that your reports are out, your financial statements are out. Today, companies are doing real-time reporting. So they are typically taking out real-time reports with respect to printing your profit and loss account at any particular point of time, and not wait for the month end or the quarter end or a particular period for a batch to run, certain activities to happen, etc. But going forward, it is going to be more real-time, which is typically going to impact day-to-day decision making, at all levels of the organization, whether it's operational or strategic. But the way in which you can actually use technology to simulate models, to use predictability, okay, in terms of various statistical methods, etc. And you don't typically need a data scientist, because conventionally, if you look at it, this is a domain of a data scientist. You need to actually be a statistician to apply statistical models on data to interpret. But today, technology is so user-friendly that even without the need of being a data scientist, I can consume statistical methods and draw inferences. And that's exactly where SAP is trying to help customers kind of achieve that. Now, how this is done is something that I would leave my colleague who's an expert in predictive, Pratul, to take forward. But having said that, the point I wanted to convey is, while total cost model, etc., are going to be the in thing going forward with respect to identifying areas of weakness, bringing in efficiency, drying away redundancies, and more importantly, there's a point I was discussing with Nagesh Babu in the morning, the concept of confidentiality. See, cost is considered to be a confidential subject, and frankly, the way we within SAP believe is cost has to be the most transparent thing. If you're transparent with respect to conveying to your peers in terms of what exactly is the cost structure, then you can drive accountability, and you can drive accountability to help reduce cost. If cost is confidential, it's going to be the domain of probably one or two stakeholders within the organization. There'll always be a problem of ownership in terms of contributing to optimize or reduce cost. With this, I would like to hand it over to Pratul, who would kind of take the balance of the session with respect to the predictability in terms of how is it that you can use predictive as a technology to have forward-looking cost models simulated. Over to you, Pratul.
Thanks, Murali. Very simply put, usually when we are in our annual business planning exercise, the standard thing which usually we see is people say, okay, our travel transportation cost has been growing at 10% year on year. Let's put a 10% figure for next year also, right? Why? It's easy. It's easily handleable. It's something we understand. But the biggest challenge which is happening is that the oil prices are not remaining static. The number of people we are going to have in the organization are not going to be static. We don't know whether we will actually maybe take double the number of flights and hire 3 times the number of sorry. Apologies for the bad throat, but this is what it happens when you travel across India with absolutely varying different weather patterns between morning and day. So what happens to what we had planned? We said our cost on travel will grow at 10%, but at end of the half year, we realized we've actually overshot our budget by say 50%. Now, if we take that into account, and that is where the advanced analytics or the predictive piece comes. And this is honestly touches every facet of the organization, because this is one area which can impact not only the cost, but more importantly, the value part of the organization, not only in the finance function, which has been traditionally where we've looked at total cost management, or the ownership of TCM residing with finance, but actually touching production, touching logistics, touching sales and marketing. You name a department, advanced analytics can add value and actually hence impact TCM in a very, very positive way. And the fundamental questions which I always want customers to ask themselves, what is the value for us? Not what is the cost of doing it faster. What is the value? What is the value of doing decisions nearer to the business? Allowing the sales guy in the field to take the decision of an additional 1% discount rather than it flowing through 10 levels before it gets approved and waste 5 days of people time. Total time wasted is 5 days for 1%. Is it actually worth it? Those are the questions which organizations need to ask. What is the value of forecasting costs more accurately, which has been the theme of this But what is the value of more accurate targeted campaigns which we do? What is the value of knowledge base of our engineers and analysts and the people in the organization? Now, this is one area which is absolutely untapped from an India context, but organizations need to start thinking about it. Now, the fundamental challenge comes, and this is what even Murali mentioned, we are not statisticians, we are business guys. So let's look at it, what happens when we look at the advanced analytics piece. And if you ask me, data availability is no longer a challenge. And this, by the way, came from Gartner, who clearly said that there are various kinds of advanced analytics or analysis, depending on what paradigm you want to subscribe to or the school of thought you're looking at. From what happened to why it happened, what will happen, to what should I do. And if you look at these 4 different areas, the amount of human intervention as well as your decision-making capabilities change dramatically. So the analogy I like to give is, it's like we are driving a car. I'm looking at the rear view mirror. It tells me what's behind me. So it's basically answered what has happened. But what should I do or what will happen is like the front windshield, which we look to see what's coming up and could possibly impact us. And this is where decision support starts adding value. Now, the challenge which happens is, if you are able to do all this, what are the challenges we face? And that is where the automation on the advanced analytics is required, because we are not data scientists. I don't understand whether I need to apply an X model or a clustering regressive model, or it needs to be a triple exponential smoothing model. This is Greek and Latin. Honestly, I didn't get good marks during my business stats paper during MBA, and I said, what is going to be the applicability? My friends still pull my leg, saying, you're the guy who now preaches it to the market. But that is where there is a need of automation. What it allows, if you have data scientists, it allows them to get results faster. More importantly, and this is where I think organizations need to start looking at advanced analytics very differently. Leveraging advanced analytics by business users, where the power shifts from the data scientists to business people, whether it's in finance, it's in production, it's in logistics, it's in quality, it's in sales and marketing. And increasing accuracy by adjusting to this new data closer to the business, nearer real time. What is the use if my forecast for week 3 of the month is actually going to come out by end of week 2 of the month? Where is the time for my entire production, my logistics, my supply chain to adjust? If the forecast, but if it came out maybe at end of week 1, we got 7 days to adjust. And that is why it needs to happen in real time. But taking the reality into scenario, what is the process we are seeing? You have multiple silos of data. Somebody pulls out the data. You start manipulating and massaging the data. It could be something as fundamental as saying, my customer master has maybe a 12-digit code in some system, while my SAP ERP maintains it as a 16-digit. How do I merge them and ensure that we have one view of the data? Then, basis your knowledge, you start reducing the variables. You can't play with the entire data. You create a predictive model. And by the way, this is usually done by people who not only have business acumen, but are also usually PhD in stats, what we call data scientists. Then you test it against the entire data set. Go back, so this piece, right from variable reduction to the scoring and validation, is actually an iterative process and takes a few months before the model is treated to be good enough for application to business. However, if we look at this entire process, what's the technology backing? Rather than some database, it should be multiple databases to multiple Excel workbooks. All this is done in Excel. You use a statistical tool. It could be open source or it could be a lot of other products. And then you start mailing those final results. Could be, what's going to be my travel cost for the next 6 months? What is going to be my demand for my product, say in Mumbai, next month? Those are the kind of answers which predictive models throw up, and you put them out via Excel sheets and multiple email chains which start happening all over. What needs to be happening is this: the need for automation, where a lot of this piece, which is in the domain of knowledge of people, is available as technology to allow business users to do it. Just see the difference, because where we looked at was the domain knowledge in terms of variable reduction, model creation, scoring, validation, and interpretation. If all of that can be automated, can't a business guy actually understand the results? And I'm sure, and I would want you all to validate this fact, if you get the results, I'm sure you'll be able to interpret it having a look at it. And that is exactly where advanced analytics or predictive modeling from a cost perspective comes. I will just leave with one thought. We usually talk about costs from a finance function, but if we have a better demand forecast, how will it impact our costs? Have we even thought about it? A 1% increase in accuracy of our forecast at an SKU/dealer or a depot level, what does it translate to us in our cost perspective? How many organizations are even thinking about it? So thank you very much. This is all what I had to present.